Who we are is one of the most important questions many of us never find sufficient answers to. That didn't sit well with me at the time, but I didn't have the words or wasn't able to articulate why exactly that was. I've also been told that America hates me and always will. I've been told that to be black is to be oppressed, less than, disadvantaged, to have a perpetual knee on my neck. All of this while growing up on the west side of Chicago in the 80s and 90s. So this was even a breakthrough in that regard. The most important is that I am human, that I'm made in God's image. Welcome to the Odyssey of a Former Fat Kid. I am your host and former fat kid, Brian Grizz Butler. And today is a special episode. Today is actually my birthday today. And I have decided that I will kind of do a walkthrough of an art piece that I did about 10 years ago. I posted about it recently on social media, kind of marking the 10 years and just reflecting on some of the things that prompted the creation of the piece, but then also ways that I have changed over these last 10 years as well. And so, yeah, I'm gonna dig into it. But first, I'll give a bit of context and backstory on to what prompted it, what my thinking was, et cetera. And so I hope you enjoy it. I know it's not necessarily about nutritional health or physical health, but it does touch on mental health and at least my mental health and spiritual health, and kind of give an inside peek into my journey and how this piece is, was and is, an exploration of that. So who we are is one of the most important questions many of us never find sufficient answers to. From about 2012 to 2015, there were a number of high profile deaths of Black Americans, which sparked national outrage. These were fueled by the Black Lives Matter movement and prompted widespread discussion about racial injustice and police brutality. This episode isn't about that, though. However, these events and discussions began within me a dialogue about my own identity. The history of humanity is replete with examples of the dehumanization of one person by another, one group by another group. The story of America is not exempt. There was a time when most of the dark-skinned people from Africa, who we currently call African American or Black, were not considered fully human, if human at all. And as we know, the vast majority were not here of their own accord. This particular belief has thankfully declined significantly over the years, and related laws have been changed. However, the high profile deaths and events between 2012 and 2015 brought an aspect of this discussion back to the national stage. For some, dare I say, for many, the answer was clear. Black people are still not viewed as fully human, and these deaths are evidence of that fact. That didn't sit well with me at the time, but I didn't have the words or wasn't able to articulate why exactly that was. Over the years, I've chewed on it, and upon recent reflection, here are some of the reasons why it didn't sit well with me, and I could even say I disagree with it now. Over my life, I've heard that my cultural heritage is African. And in order to figure out who I am, I need to somehow reconnect with the African continent. The reality is, I'm American. I was born, raised, and currently live in America. My culture is Western, and that's fine. When I was young, the respectable term for people who looked like me was African American. This was coined, I believe, by Jesse Jackson. While race, as we use it, is a social construct, it is now the water we swim in. So, as a problematic shorthand descriptor of my appearance and part of my culture, I accept Black, the most current term, over African American. Funny enough, folks who are young enough don't realize that Negro was actually the preferred term by Black folks for a long time and used widely before African American. I've also been told that America hates me and always will. I've been told that to be black is to be oppressed, less than, disadvantaged, to have a perpetual knee on my neck. And this has most often come from public black figures, media, movies, etc. But white person has never called me nigger to my face. I've never been harassed by the police. I've never been told I'm not welcome or been denied service or a job because of my skin, hair when I had hair, or facial features. I went to and graduated from college, and much more. I grew up in a two-parent home. My parents have been married for over 40 years. My parents love the Lord. They love each other. My three younger brothers are all married, working, and have no criminal records. All of this while growing up on the west side of Chicago in the 80s and 90s. I'm married, I have children, I work full time, I have a business, I run this podcast, and Lord willing, I'll be able to do more for His glory. I also know Black people who have not had anything like my experience, and that's a topic for another time. Ironically, many Black people who have had very similar or better experiences than me are some of the most vocal and hateful towards the US, white people, and Black people who don't share their point of view. My direct, but more often indirect experiences with this animosity were also in the mix between 2012 and 2015. Interestingly enough, during that same time frame, I think it was 2014, I learned about the longest running juried art exhibition in the country called the Black Creativity Juried Art Exhibition. And that was at the, and it still runs too, but it was at the, what was then called the Museum of Science and Industry. I think it's something called like the Griffin Museum of Science and Industry or something like that now. A family friend, Sabrina Williams, oversaw the exhibition at that time and invited me to submit an entry. I admit I was a bit embarrassed that I didn't know about it. I was also intimidated. It's no secret that artists are often very critical of their own work, and I'm no exception. But I set those concerns aside and began brainstorming. I'm naturally a verbal processor, but sometimes words fail, and music and images, or both, are needed to further explore and communicate what I'm thinking and feeling. That actually brings to mind, speaking of music, there was when I was still in high school, I think. Yeah. And I was homeschooled. There were definitely times where the melancholy artist part of me would come out and I would play music, but I would play it loud enough for like some of my other family to hear. And sometimes, yeah, during that period, like I would listen to like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon soundtrack, aspects of the Schindler's List soundtrack, Gladiator, Saving Private Ryan. And some of those obviously are some really like sad tracks, but they really just connected with some emotions that I was feeling at times. But I also had to be mindful of, you know, my other family members who was there. And I remember one time my mom mentioning that she's like, Brian, you just please turn it off right now. Because it had her and my sister all in their feels and sobbing. So music is powerful. And yeah, there's definitely a melancholy artist part of me that gets into that type of music. But anyway, I took that internal dialogue that started, you know, 2012, 2013, etc. And I decided to further process it through this piece that I ultimately submitted to the Juried Art Exhibition. Recently, I posted about it, this particular piece, and how I've changed over the last 10 years, like I mentioned earlier. And someone who saw the post asked if I would do a walkthrough of what the piece means. So we'll do that now. This is the piece. Obviously, it's a self-portrait. Funny enough, this was actually, I think, maybe only the second time I'd drawn myself. And so that was a task in and of itself. Because it took me a while to actually get it to a place where I was like, okay, does it look like me? Are the proportions anything, you know, are they accurate, you know, etc. Some artists draw themselves a lot, but I did not. and avoided it a lot over the years. Never sat down in front of a mirror, practiced or anything like that. I just didn't like the way that I looked, and so I was like, why would I draw myself? So this was even a breakthrough in that regard. Yeah, so I decided to explore my identity through this, and I just kind of work my way down. I didn't know I was gonna call it human at the outset, um, but that wound up being the title of this piece. And for those who know, who have followed me for some years now, they know that this wound up turning into a series of other illustrations, some prints, and some apparel that I did, over the last 10 years. But we'll work our way down. So we have human, you have me, you got my self portrait, etc. My name, Brian, which is the name that my parents gave me, and so that's a core component as well. And the importance is also like where these pieces where these titles appear on the piece is also an indicator of their importance. And so the name that my parents gave me, this is Genesis 1:26 through 27, chapter 1, verses 26 through 27, which talks about um, humankind, man being made in God's own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, who created them. And so that is, I'm a Christian, and this is foundational as well, that I and every other person is made in the image of God and worthy of dignity and respect. And then Revelation 5:9 is Revelation is the last book in the Bible, and there it talks about it's depicting a picture of um, humanity in heaven. Um, well, those who have accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, with God in heaven. And it says that God called for himself people from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And so again, we have the beginning. People were made in God's image, male and female, who created them, worthy of dignity and respect. And the fact that, for some people, especially here in the U.S., and I guess to say that there's some iteration of this lie in other areas of the world as well. But one thing that many Black people actually still believe is that Christianity is the white man's religion. They believe it came from Europe. They believe that the only reason that Christians in the U.S. are black, are the only reason that Black people in the U.S. are Christian is because we were indoctrinated by white people and it was beat into us, etc. But unfortunately, this communicates a it's a terrible lie. In summary, Christianity started in the Middle East, spread from the Middle East to North Africa, and also across the Mediterranean into Europe. And so, even speaking of Africa, Christianity reached Africa in the first century AD. And so it's been there for millennia. Um, and it also went to Europe. And so Christianity was in Africa long before the transatlantic slave trade, long before Western Europeans started colonizing. So setting that aside, but God called for himself people from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And so that communicates also that God is interested in all people. He cares for all people. And there will be people whom he calls from every tongue, tribe, and nation, not just Europeans, not just Black folks, not just Africans, but every tongue, tribe, and nation. So then we work our way down. Like I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of the African American term. Learn a bit more about it. I'm not African. And funny enough, Black folks who go to Africa often encounter a welcome, not across the board, but a welcome that's different than they expect, because they don't realize that even though many of us may look like our African brothers and sisters, we think differently. Our culture is different. In some cases, our religion is different. And so there's, in ways, they view us as American, which we are, and or more Western, which we are, and not African. And so there's definitely a difference there. But all that to say, I've accepted the utilization of the term Black, even though it has its problems. And I am an American, not an African. And then at the bottom, of least importance, is a variety of terms. Most are negative racial slurs, but not all of them. Like we have what Negro right here, which was really popular even amongst Black folks. It's how we refer to ourselves before African American. But then you have other terms too that are not so endearing. Most are terms that have been leveled at us by racist white people over the years. But then there are some too that have been um, the product of Black people towards Black people who either don't think like them, act like them. In some cases, it's also um, the product of what's the term I want to use? Animosity and separation created by some of the slave masters. But like in a recent post that I put up too, Oreo is one of those terms that's utilized by Black folks towards other Black folks, saying you're Black on the outside but white on the inside. Um, Token can be one of those, that can get some utilization as well. Uncle Tom is also one that gets used, but yeah, that's essentially a walkthrough of the piece. Chief among all of these, at least at that particular time, where I landed, was that more importantly than um, my name and all these slurs, being Black, being American, the most important is that I am human and I'm made in God's image. And for me, since I've trusted Christ as my Lord and personal Savior, not by my own works, but by the works of Christ, that I look forward to worshiping my Lord and Savior with other brothers and sisters from every tongue, tribe, and nation. And then aesthetically, this was very much inspired by Time magazine covers. And so for those who didn't make that connection, as soon as I say it, they're gonna be like, okay, yep, got it. Time usually has their bold serif font across the top with strong portraits on some of their covers. They went through a series where they had a lot of strong portraits. I think they still do that. And so mine was very much inspired by Time magazine portrait photography approach and the cover itself. Some people even asked when they saw it, was it a magazine cover or a mock-up of a magazine cover? And so, yes, definitely inspired by that, proportions and everything. But yeah, that's a walkthrough of the piece. I will also in the show notes post photos of the other human pieces that I've done, and then also some shots of me at the juried art exhibition. This piece did get accepted, so my first submission to the exhibition did get accepted. So I have some photos from that as well, and then some of the behind the scenes photos, the reference photos that I was looking at, some of the pictures that I took, and some digital explorations of things as well. Oh, the way that I produced this too. This is a wood panel. So I painted the sides, and then I drew the portrait on here, painted it with India ink, which is like watercolor, but it's not water soluble. So once it's on there, that's it. So yeah, painted that on the wood panel, and then did the white. This is just white gesso and white paint, working its way in here, and use that for some highlights as well. And then the way that I applied the text. So I printed all of the text, I laid it all out, and then printed it on an 18 by 24 sheet of paper with his laser print. And I learned about this technique. And so then I take a clear gel medium, apply it over the painting of the portrait, and then you print the words backwards, and then you lay it on top, smooth it out, you let it dry, and then in that drying process, the ink transfers to the gel, and then you go through a laborious process of uh, dampening dampening the paper with water, and then slowly rubbing it off until you're left with this. And I think I put another coat, just to seal it as well. So that was the process. Rubbing the paper off was a little tedious. Thumb got a little sore. But I found fingers were the best. Trying to use other stuff would just get too abrasive and you run the risk of damaging. Um, and even some of the ink didn't necessarily transfer all the way, but it added a nice little texture, to it as well. So that's the walkthrough of the piece. Thank you for taking some time to hear the backstory on this and go on a bit of a journey with me. I'll catch you at the next episode.